You're listening to the Dispassionate ADF Veteran's Voice. Each episode is generated and narrated using artificial intelligence, specifically Google's Notebook LM, drawing from official records like the Royal Commission Final Report, government strategies, inquiry reports, and lived experience accounts. The narration is delivered in American accents, as that is all that is available in this emerging AI tool. Don't let that distract you. This isn't the voice of any one veteran or organisation. It's Australia's veterans' story, told through evidence, not opinion. Here are your hosts.
Welcome to the deep dive. You've given us a really interesting set of sources this time. They challenge a core idea about military service, that it's just between the soldier and the state. So today, our mission is to look past the veteran. We're diving deep into the effects, often unseen, that service has on the whole family.
Exactly. And what the sources show is, well, it's a critical shift in thinking, for institutions anyway. We're moving slowly, perhaps, from just focusing on the veteran's recovery. See, that often the family is in trauma, not just the veteran. That's a direct quote, and it's powerful.
Right. So we need to unpack that, the emotional costs, the financial ones, even generational impacts.
Yes, all of that. Because the policy implication seems pretty clear from these documents. You have to design services that treat the veteran in the context of their family.
And family here is broad, isn't it? We're not just talking about a spouse.
No, not at all. It includes partners, children, parents, even ex-partners sometimes. Anyone who's part of that core support network.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the official side. What does transition actually mean according to the system?
Well, the official definition is pretty sweeping. It covers the whole journey, not just for the veteran, mind you, but for their entire family. As they move from, an ADF-centered life, that's the Australian Defence Force, to mostly civilian life.
So it's way more than just handing in your uniform.
Oh, absolutely. It's about identity shifts, big emotional adjustments, your relationships, social and family ones, they might completely change. It's a total life overhaul, really.
It's interesting, though. This modern focus on family feels new, but recognizing the family sacrifice isn't entirely new, is it? Your sources had an old example from early VPAT days.
Yes, that was fascinating. It really shows the family unit was central, even, over 100 years ago. There's this case, Ross Jacob, back in 1917. He applied for repatriation.
But not because he was wounded.
No, that's the key. It was because his family is falling apart due to service impacts. Two brothers were permanently unfit from service. Another was a POW. And their aging father. He couldn't manage the family farm back in Kadina, South Australia, on his own anymore.
Wow. So his discharge was argued on the grounds of basically the family unit collapsing under the weight of service.
Precisely. The family's inability to function because of the cumulative service impact was seen as a valid reason. Now, if that was the view back then, imagine the complexity today when so many impacts are psychological. And those definitely don't stay contained within the veteran.
No, they spill over. Absolutely. Mental ill health, depression, it becomes a family issue.
It really does. The sources talk about the psychological spillover, how veterans with PTSD, for instance, might try to numb things, often with drugs or alcohol.
Leading to disconnection.
It's exactly. Disconnection from relationships, self-isolation. Communication just breaks down. And one source tragically calls suicide the ultimate disconnect. We read, personal stories, veterans spiraling down, heavy drinking, marriage breakdown, all stemming from untreated trauma from service.
And the partners, the spouses, they're left trying to cope with the fallout. The burden must be incredible.
Overwhelming. The accounts from carers paint a stark picture, extreme pressure. There was one story from the wife of an infantry veteran. It was particularly harrowing, about dealing with trauma exposure, even in their sleep.
What happened?
Her husband had night terrors, so violent apparently, that he would physically attack her in his sleep, unknowingly. She ended up having to get a domestic violence order, not because he's intentionally abusive, but just to be safe from the physical manifestation of his trauma.
That's terrifying. It brings the war zone right into the home, literally.
It does, and it shows how immediate and devastating trauma's reality can be for families, in ways policy often doesn't capture.
And the burden isn't just emotional or physical, is it? It quickly becomes administrative, too. When the veteran can't cope, who fights the bureaucracy?
It falls onto the family.
Yeah.
Almost always the partner. They become this unpaid caseworker and advocate. We saw an account from one wife. Her husband had physical injuries and suicidal thoughts. She described the stress of just trying to get support.
The paperwork.
She mentioned a meter-high pile of paperwork just trying to navigate DVA, that's Veterans Affairs and Com Super benefits, all while managing the home, the emotional crisis.
A meter of complex forms in bureaucratic language while your loved one is falling apart. That sounds like adding trauma on top of trauma.
Exactly. She said the stress of that fight, that bureaucratic nightmare, was beyond her husband's capacity. It wasn't just the injuries, it was battling the system. And that brings us to, well, even more direct examples of the system failing families, sometimes outright betrayal.
This is where trust just shatters, I imagine. You mentioned that really shocking account, the wife of a career Navy member.
Yes. Years later, 7 years after the fact, her husband got his medical records and found a psychologist's report in there.
With an allegation.
A really damaging one. The psychologist claimed the veteran had fabricated a fantasy story that his wife has had miscarriage. Just to malinger, to avoid going to sea.
Fabricated a miscarriage? That's appalling.
Think about finding that. Years later, not only was his suffering dismissed as faking, but his wife's personal tragedy, her pain, was twisted into a lie by the very system meant to help.
That's not just systemic failure. That's a personal, institutional attack. The wife's conclusion must have been devastating.
It was. She said very powerfully, the system hadn't just failed him by being suspicious, it had fundamentally failed her and her family by erasing her experience, her integrity.
That kind of deep skepticism from within the system, it shows the cost isn't just personal, it's systemic. It destroys the trust you need for anyone to heal.
Precisely. And it undermines everything.
Let's shift focus slightly to the longer-term effects, the generational costs. When trauma is that deep, what happens to the kids?
Well, the sources are quite clear, and it's sobering. There's evidence of intergenerational harm. The impact travels down the generations. Studies, particularly looking back at Vietnam veterans' children, showed higher rates of congenital abnormalities compared to the general population.
A biological link? Is that established? What kinds of issues?
The sources specifically highlighted spina bifida. Rates were apparently 10 times higher than average among children of Vietnam veterans studied. So that shows a really profound, lasting biological legacy. It goes beyond just coping mechanisms. It's a physical cost passed on.
That's just heartbreaking. And even if the issues aren't biological, growing up in that kind of high-stress environment, the psychological impact on children must have long-term consequences too, economic ones even.
Absolutely. Research tracks this. Childhood psychological issues linked to these family stressors. They correlate with lower adult family incomes later on, specifically about $10,400 less per year, according to one source, and also an 11% lower likelihood of being married as an adult.
So it's not just individual struggles. It's a measurable, long-term economic drain on individuals, families, and society.
Exactly. It's a huge societal cost stemming from that initial service impact.
It creates this ripple effect, generation after generation, which ties back to that ideal of transition and losing community support, doesn't it?
It does. One transition agent in the sources made a great point. It's not just the service member leaving the ADF community. The whole family is losing that connection as well, and the support services that they have as well. Kids lose that structure too.
And this feeling of being failed, ignored, frustrated, it actually fueled change, didn't it? Families themselves pushed for reform.
That's a really crucial point. The recent Royal Commission into Defense and Veteran Suicide, it explicitly acknowledged families were critical in getting the inquiry established in the first place. Their advocacy, their willingness to share really painful stories, that's what forced the system to start listening.
So we're now seeing that reflected, at least in strategy documents, this shift towards family-focused support. What does that look like on paper?
Well, the commitment is definitely there now, officially. The Veteran Transition Strategy, for example, it has Priority 6, ensuring veterans and their families feel supported and recognized. And a key objective under that is families are engaged through transition. It's now a stated goal.
And DVA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, they're making changes too, expanding access to counseling services.
They've worked on expanding eligibility for Open Arms, which is their counseling service, trying to bring more family members into that support net. And beyond that specific service, there's this push for a broader veteran-centric approach, which sounds like it's just about the veteran.
But the idea is you can't be veteran-centric without considering their context.
Exactly. It means looking at all the domains of veteran well-being, recognizing that a healthy life for the veteran is tied up with a healthy life for their family.
Okay, the philosophy sounds right. And then there's the big one. The Defense and Veteran Family Well-Being Strategy, what's its main aim?
Its core mission is to really guide support proactively. It explicitly acknowledges past failings, which is important. The idea is to look at family well-being holistically across all areas of life and to engage with families directly, proactively, not just waiting for a crisis.
So moving from reactive to proactive.
Supposedly, yes, from crisis response to active engagement.
But there's always a but, isn't there? Despite these strategies, the sources also flagged problems, a consultation gap. Who's being missed?
Yeah, this is really important feedback coming through. Even with this focus on families, many diverse family members feel left out. We're talking First Nations families, parents of veterans, ex-partners, people who are grandcarers, LGBTQIA+ families, those from culturally diverse backgrounds. They've reported feeling excluded from key discussions or just not getting the same level of support as maybe a more traditional family unit.
If the strategy is meant to be holistic, why the gap? Is it just not reaching them?
It seems like a mix of things. One big one is information. Simple, practical information barriers. Families say info is often given to the serving member, but it doesn't reliably get passed on to the family.
Right. And if the veteran is the one struggling, they're maybe not in the best place to be the family's information conduit.
Precisely. That puts the whole support system's success on the shoulders of the person least equipped to carry it at that moment. And families had a very practical idea here.
Which was?
They suggested having an actual person, a staff member, available to answer their questions directly, not just pointing them to a website or relying on the veteran.
Makes sense. Direct contact. And that leads to the next point, doesn't it? Partnership. Co-design. Families wanting a say in how things are set up.
Yes, exactly. They stressed needing to be included in designing and implementing programs, not just consulted after the fact. That way, you avoid unintended problems, make sure services actually fit their real lives, which are often messy and complicated. Without that co-design, policies might just miss the mark entirely.
Okay, so stepping back, the picture's pretty clear. The family unit is absolutely central to how a veteran does. And families bear huge costs themselves, emotional trauma, financial strain, that endless admin burden. We've seen these costs play out over decades. Intergenerational health issues, psychological burdens, systemic neglect.
And the new strategies, like the veteran transition strategy and the family well-being strategy, they represent a major shift, at least in stated intention, towards holistic, family-inclusive support. The aim is to move the whole system beyond just seeing the veteran as the problem or the patient, to make it adaptive, empowering for the whole family.
The strategic commitment seems to be there now. The big challenge, though, is making that real, turning those documents into actual, tangible change on the ground, especially for those diverse families who still feel they're on the outside looking in.
And that really brings us to a complex final thought for you, the listener. We know implementing big government reforms is hard. Sometimes recommendations from inquiries get, well, adapted. Agencies might talk about meeting the intent rather than the strict letter of a recommendation. Given the history here, the broken trust we've talked about.
How much transparency is needed?
Exactly. What level of transparency do you think government agencies need to show when they explain how they're meeting the intent of reforms, especially if it differs from the precise wording? How do they balance the practicalities of bureaucracy with the absolute necessity of rebuilding and maintaining trust with veteran families on this very long road?
You've just heard a conversation built and presented entirely by AI from official sources. No speculation, no shortcuts. From Royal Commission findings to lived experience, we're unpacking the veteran ecosystem. If this episode helped you make sense of the system or gave voice to something you've felt but couldn't name, consider subscribing and liking the channel. That way, you'll be notified when the next episode drops. Send a link to a mate if you think they might benefit from synthesizing the massive information too. We'll upload at least one a week, each tackling a major issue with clarity, dignity, and zero spin. There will be 10 main episodes and many more spin-offs. This isn't just a podcast. It's clarity that is easy to consume and will help to mobilize those who really care.